everyone loves a good story, right? But it's really cool to be in one. My most memorable ones tend to be of times I've been in really weird or uncomfortable situations. You're all writing one with me right now. Trust me, I am definitely outside my comfort zone. Having a colonoscopy? Way easier. So tonight I want to tell you about the time I went to Cambodia to build a toilet. It was a few years ago now, the year I turned 50. You don't look 50, Eloise. Thanks guys, I'll blush. Anyway, to make it fun rather than depressing, I wrote a list, the 50 list. 50 things to do aged 50. So, ideally, to make the list, they had to be, well, obviously fun, but ideally weird. I mean, how else was I going to come up with the crazy idea of going to Cambodia to build a toilet when I am probably the only person in all of BC who doesn't smoke weed? Firstly, I need to confess though, I've always been a little bit of a princess where travel's concerned. Obviously, I blame my parents. I mean, a princess never has to accept responsibility for her own actions. My father flew for British Airways, so I grew up with free first-class travel and five-star hotel. Please don't hate me. I don't want you to vote for me tonight. But when you go into the construction industry in Southeast Asia, you do not get given the diva treatment. Okay, one more confession. I did actually fly there first class, but it was on offer, so I took it. I was going to hang on to that metaphorical tiara for as long as I could. But upon arrival, I happily gave up my royal title. And I would like to point out, I did it way before Meghan and Harry made that one. I then donned the traditional uniform of the hippie traveller. You know, multiple friendship bracelets, those big baggy pants where the crutch comes down to your knees and looks like a soggy diaper. Yeah? Yeah, I was after the fully immersive experience. Next, it was time to go and meet my fellow travellers, my new BFFs. He didn't know they were going to be that yet, but I was going to force friend the hell out of them. Strangely, they had turned out to all be over 50 as well. And I guess that's what happens when you book through midlifecrisis.com. Every day, my royal chariot, well, a cart pulled by a moped, took us to a nearby village. I loved that 45-minute journey. It was a time I could just get fully into character and try on this new personality that I was auditioning for myself. Now, as a former royal, my toilet building abilities were not great. But fortunately, my new BFFs were as clueless as I was. So we all relied on a very patient, non-English speaking local builder to teach us. So every day, through the art of mime, I learned a new skill, right from the basics of laying a concrete floor, building a brick wall. There's always a wall in mine, right? Right the way up to being able to squat and pee without getting my hippie pants wet. I mean, just because they looked like a soggy diaper didn't mean I had to feel like one. And don't forget, there is no toilet yet. But we did it. We built a very basic outdoor toilet. And I loved every moment of it. So much so, I retired my tiara. Well, almost. It does come out on special occasions, you know, like birthdays, Christmas, Tuesdays. And I got my story, but it isn't just mine to tell. I share it with those 8 amazing fellow adventurers, but more importantly, an incredible family in Cambodia. Not only do they get to laugh at the inadequacies of 8 pseudo-hippies, but they don't have to share a toilet with 6 other houses anymore. That was 36 people. So by creating this 50 list, I gave myself a wealth of stories. So watch out, story slammers, I'll be back. But, hang on guys, but by building the toilet, I gave myself a wealth of experience. I knew Eloise was born in Cambodia, and you know what? I quite like her. Now you can clap.
Thank you. Just testing the mic real quick, see how loud I need to be. I'm going to tell you the story of my friend Mark. This is called The Heavy Kite. One day, my sister saw a giant kite flying high in the air. It was so unbelievably large, you could see it from miles away. My sister wondered aloud, a kite like that must be expensive. Why would anyone waste their money on that? Most kites are broken by the weekend, so why pay such a high price? I don't know if any of you have ever tried to carve marble using only your hands and simple tools. It takes weeks to see a difference. Embedded in a mountain, that stone took centuries to form. Changing such things can also be expensive. But Bernini, an Italian sculptor from long ago, didn't see it the same way. For Bernini, it was worth it to spend even years just to set free the figure that he saw inside the stone. Years ago, I was in Prague scouting for a movie with my friend Mark. We were in an ancient cemetery when he began to tell me his story. See, Prague was once a part of the Soviet Union, and Mark grew up under the oppressive communist regime. It was a place where no one dared to even speak of their dreams to leave. Inside the walls, your choices were few, and if you stood out in any way, your head was put on the chopping block. Mark was 19 or 20 at the time, and we, who were so lucky, could say he had his whole life ahead of him to decide what he wanted. And as Mark and I traveled through this cemetery, filled with the forgotten dreams of those who came before us, he told me what he had always wanted to be, an artist. But to be an artist in Prague at this time would be impossible. It was a place where expression was not allowed, where escape meant treason and traitors were shot in their tracks. It must be heavy to fly that kite. But Mark was offered a chance to travel to Yugoslavia for some work, and the train would pass through Austria, which was a free country. Mark knew he could jump that train and disappear while no one was looking. He had little time to decide, and at his age, just 19 years old, he had a lot of courage to find. There would be no friends on the other side, no jobs or money, and no language that he could speak. And once he left, he knew he could never come back, or he'd be shot. In any direction, to say a goodbye was to say a goodbye forever. There he was, just a teenager, talking to his mom the day before departure. Was he going to say goodbye forever to his family or to his dreams? And as his mom left the conversation, she thought nothing different. She'd see him tomorrow, while he vomited courageously. Young Mark had decided, and he had guessed what Bernini knew, that it was too expensive to leave that image behind. It was too expensive to leave that figure in the rock forever, for no one else to see, especially himself. And so my friend carved his way out of the stone that held him. And that's a story that I hope one day he will tell. I'm here to tell you the story about my friend I met on the other side. When I first met Mark, I thought he was Australian, not Czech, because he spoke in an Aussie accent about surfing and art and travel and the world. See, he made his way across the ocean and applied for education to become the artist that he had once envisioned himself to be, and against impossible odds. And now, he is one of the greatest cinematographers that I know. As we walked through the cemetery together, decades later, tears formed in his eyes. The Czechs were listening to him too, in their language, because years later, he had come back. Years later, he did see his family again. You see, communism itself had fallen under another kind of unbearable weight, another heavier expense, the dreams of human beings. The heavy kite is not so heavy after all. It is the lightness of human dreams that's too heavy an expense for our oppression to bear. And we are the witnesses from miles away. So the artist should not ponder his or her own value with lament. It's those of us who only saw the rock who are truly burdened. Because when the artist carves his or her way out from these oppressive forces that do indeed surround us all, those very mountains that imprisoned us for centuries will fall under the weight of our dreams, and we are left with a vision that becomes real.
In the restaurant parking lot after a dinner to celebrate the engagement of a close friend, people talked not of the successful dinner, but rather about the frequency with which the fiancé had to continue to leave dinner to go to the bathroom. Now, this was not something that I had paid attention to or noticed, but people told me in no uncertain terms in that parking lot, because he went so often, it was irrefutable evidence he must be on drugs. One parking lot detective went so far as to say, he must be on cocaine! Now, I don't know if he was actually on drugs, but that was the impression that we were left with, and that's what I was thinking about as I went on to my next date, which happened to be a first date with a girl named Andrea. Now, it should be noted that I don't really enjoy dating. Romantic relationships for me tend to be a series of unfortunate events in which I just about manage to get by until it all inevitably falls apart. However, I was inspired by the recent engagement dinner and seeing how happy my friend was with her relationship. I thought that I should give this a go. And so I drove over to Andrea's place, I picked her up, and we went to the Old Foundation restaurant at Main and 7th to enjoy dinner. As we were seated, I had to go to the bathroom. So I went and it was fine, I came back, no problem. But about 30 minutes later, I had to go again. I don't know what was wrong with me that night, but I couldn't stop needing to go to the bathroom. My brain and my bladder would not cooperate, and after a couple of visits, I could not risk a third visit to the bathroom, lest she think that I'm on drugs. At one point I was really struggling, I really needed to go, and Andrea looked at me and she said, I need to go to the bathroom. Would you mind if I go and if you can wait here? This was my chance. As she went towards the bathroom, I was sneaking carefully behind her, always maintaining a safe distance, and when she went into the women's, I rushed into the men's, and I was willing to risk that I could sneak in, sneak out, get back to the table before she got back, and I did. Crisis averted, but only for a short period. When I was next desperate to go, I needed to come up with another scheme. It occurred to me that I had only paid for 2 hours of parking, so I said I was going to add more time to the meter. Andrea was surprised that 2 hours had passed by so quickly, which I thought was a great sign, and she agreed that I should add more time to the meter. And so I walked towards the front exit of the restaurant, and when she wasn't looking, I dashed in the opposite direction, and I went to relieve myself yet again. I returned to the table, I sat down, and I told her that I had added more time to the meter. It occurred to me at this time that now I was lying, I'd been sneaking around, I was scheming, I was hiding a non-existent drug addiction, all on the first date, and then I wonder why these things don't work out for me. Somehow, this date went incredibly well. I even managed to hide and conceal the parking ticket I had received from the dash of my car before she sat in and I drove her home. I dropped her off, our lips locked for a momentary romantic exchange, and then we parted ways for the night. I was so happy that this date had gone so well. Somehow, I managed to make it through. Unfortunately, as time passed, things did not continue to go so well. As she frequently failed to show up for commitments, we would only ever hang out on her schedule, and sometimes she would go extended periods with no communication at all. It was not a great situation. A few months later, I went with friends to Olympic Village, which is where Andrea lived and where she was supposed to meet us. Of course, she did not. As we hopped from bar to bar, Andrea continued to ask via text message if we could let her know where we were going to be, and she would join us at the next location, which of course she did not. Eventually, sitting in R&B Brewing, I decided I wanted to be more present with my friends, and so I gave my phone to my friend who was sitting on my left, and she began to read some of the text exchanges with Andrea. She then passed the phone to my friend on my right, and then he began to do the same thing. So people began passing my phone, and everybody started sharing their comments and thoughts about this person. She was a terrible person, I need to break up with her, she only wants a booty call. It was just a lot of not great stuff. And then somebody gave the phone back to me, and all I could see on the screen were a whole bunch of sound waves because somebody had accidentally hit the voice memo, and all of these disparaging comments were recorded on the phone. I had never seen this voice memo function before, and so I panicked and I accidentally hit send. And so then we all took our phones out and started to Google, how do you take back a voice memo? How do you delete it? 2 minutes passed, 5 minutes passed, we're searching, 10 minutes passed. There was no way that it was going to come back. Somehow, I survived that first date. There was no way I was going to survive this. Andrea and I never spoke again, and I still don't enjoy dating. Romantic relationships